Welcome to part 2 of the PLAAFP, where we're going to talk about a review of FIE data, impact statement, and services. My name is Dina Crook. I am the Parent Education Coordinator for the Lake Travis CPAC. I am also a retired professor of instruction from Texas State University, where I worked with pre-service teachers for over 20 years. I have taught in the public schools as a special education teacher and as a dyslexia therapist. The PLAAFP is a very important part of the IEP document. As parent or guardian, you want to be an active participant in the ARD committee and ARD committee decisions. So remember to request a copy of the draft IEP 5 school days prior to the ARD so that you can read through it and be an informed participant in the process of the ARD. In order to paint a rich tapestry of the student, we need to have or know why the student qualified for special education. So there will be information from the full individual evaluation known as the FIE, and if a child had an FBA, functional behavior assessment, that data will also be contained within the first part of the PLAAFP statement. So what do we get from these evaluations? Usually in the PLAAFP, it will state the qualifying condition or conditions that the child has in order to get special education services. And potentially it will be a short summary of the FIE that includes the student's areas of strength and the areas of challenge for that student. So I'm going to read for you an example of a statement that could be contained within the PLAAFP, and I'm going to stop along the way and tell you how that helps us to have a rich picture of that student. So blank is currently an 8th grade student at blank middle school receiving special education services under the qualifying factors of a student with a specific learning disability in the areas of basic reading, written expression, math calculation, and math problem solving. He also qualifies or meets the criteria for dyslexia and dysgraphia. Okay, time out. What does all of that do? How does that help us? Well, it tells us that this student has a learning disability that's really going to impact learning in reading, writing, math calculation, and math problem solving. And that he has the condition of dyslexia, probably for the basic reading, so that reading words or knowing the code for the English language in order to be able to read is a difficulty. And the student also has dysgraphia, which makes handwriting difficult for the student, and at times it can be very illegible. So that builds a picture of that student and the disabilities that that student has, and kind of gives us an overview of, oh, these are some areas where we can predict that the student might have some breakdown in learning. According to his FIE dated, and that's important. The data of the FIE is important because every 3 years, students qualify for a reevaluation. Of course, you can always ask for a reevaluation to be done with good premise for the committee. So maybe your child was tested very young in preschool and they're now in first grade, and the testing, with a young student, their educational bucket's not very full, so we don't get as good a picture of who that student is. So maybe as a first grader, we want to get a better picture of that student, so we can ask for an evaluation to be done sooner than that 3-year window. Okay, that was a little bit extra there. Okay, so the FIE is dated, has many cognitive strengths. Those cognitive strengths include short-term memory, crystallized intelligence, retrieval fluency, learning efficiency, and fluid reasoning. Okay, even though this child has these learning disabilities, dyslexia and dysgraphia, this child does have some areas of strength, and those are important to recognize because we can use those areas of strength in the plan that we make in learning. The student has cognitive deficits in the areas of auditory processing, visual processing, processing speed, and orthographic processing. So this is showing us where the challenges are and how his cognitive challenges impact his learning. So for example, processing speed. That child that tells us will probably need some more wait time to think about things, to be able to read and comprehend. So those things are very important in letting us know, hey, these are some considerations, some adaptations, some accommodations that we might need to make in learning to help the student to be successful. Impact statement. The impact statement defines how the disability or disabilities, qualifying conditions, impacts the student's access and progress to the general education program. What you need to know is that depending on the author of the PLAAFP, they have some preferences. Some people writing the PLAAFP like to have one big impact statement that covers the disability, all disabilities or qualifying conditions and how those impact the student and progress in the educational program. Some authors of PLAAFPs, when they're talking about reading, for example, will just have the qualifying condition of dyslexia, and they'll talk about how dyslexia impacts the student. And then when you get to the area of math in the PLAAFP, if that's how they set it up, then they'll talk about how maybe math calculation, a specific learning disability in math calculation, impacts the student's ability in math. So somewhere in your PLAAFP, you'll have impact statements for each of the disabilities. I'm going to read to you and then I'm going to stop and talk about some of the golden nuggets in this impact statement. Blank's receptive and expressive language deficits make it difficult for her to express her wants and needs to the classroom staff. That's a good golden nugget of information. Because there are deficits in receptive and expressive language, I'm going to expect that there will probably be some speech goals for this student to help address those deficits. Continue reading. Autism makes it difficult for her to initiate peer and adult engagements, and her rigidity can make changes in schedule difficult without preemptive priming. This tells me a lot of things. One of the things I pick up on this is that maybe schedule changing is hard, so maybe we're going to have the accommodation of notifying the student of a schedule change. So we know we have a fire drill at 2 o'clock. We're going to make sure that that student knows plenty of times during the day, and we're going to know that she's going to know that at 2 o'clock we're going to stop our math so we can go outside for that fire drill, reducing anxiety and hopefully preventing any kind of dysregulation or minimizing dysregulation because of the schedule change. Although she's made strides in socializing with her peers in the G3 setting, she is still reluctant to engage her peers in the inclusion setting without modeling and prompting. That's another golden nugget. Okay, she's having trouble with her peers in inclusion setting. So are we thinking about maybe this child might need a social skills goal to help her learn how to interact with peers and have conversations? That might be something that the committee should be thinking about because of this impact statement. Blank's classification of dyslexia makes it difficult for her to access passages and text on a 4th grade level, which in turn makes it difficult for her to successfully navigate lessons, activities in the inclusion setting without paraprofessional assistance and specific accommodations to help her better access the content. That one long sentence gives me 3 golden nuggets in there. The first golden nugget is dyslexia. Because this student is a student with dyslexia, is she receiving a evidence-based dyslexia reading program as specified in the Texas Dyslexia Mandate? The second golden nugget is she needs paraprofessional assistance. So I'm going to be thinking about the schedule of services. When she's in the inclusion setting for English language arts, is there a paraprofessional in there helping her to access that 4th grade curriculum that she might be required to read on her own, but because of this dyslexia, she's not able to? So that paraprofessional becomes very important. And is she getting specific accommodations? Okay, so accommodations again could be having something read to her, either through the inclusion support, or maybe having a text to speech function on her Chromebook or other digital device that she's using. So those accommodations become really important. Then we also need to have a description of the current services. Again, we're at that roadmap. Here's where we're at. Here are the schedule of services that we're receiving now. And we can be thinking about that as we think about other things. Is she being successful? We might learn that in the PLAAFP. Being successful in her goals, then maybe we can reduce the schedule of services. If the student's needing more support, then we might want to increase the schedule of services. But we have to know what those schedule of services are now in order to be thinking about what they should be in the proposed IEP that the ARD committee will be discussing. So Blank receives instructional related services through special education. She receives evidence-based dyslexia services 48 minutes a day, 5 days a week. She also has inclusion support in her ELA class for 48 minutes per day and in her math class for 48 minutes per day. Additionally, she receives speech therapy for 20 minutes or 7 sessions per grading period. This is a middle school student. So when the committee meets, we know what she's currently receiving. And if she's being successful in her speech goals, for example, and she's mastered them, then maybe speech therapy or services for direct are no longer needed and they can become indirect, or she can be dismissed from speech. So having an idea of what they're receiving now, or the student's receiving now, helps us to think about when we read the other parts of the PLAAFP, if those services, again, are still needed. Do they need to be increased? Do they need to be reduced? Or can the child be dismissed from certain services? So important. Okay, stay tuned for part 3.